Hi, hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are live once again. I'm excited about today's guest, Daniel Campen from Campen Estate and Planning in Peachtree City. So, Daniel, welcome aboard.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing today?
I am well. How are you?
Doing good. How's
It's a
life been
pleasure to be
treating
here.
you?
It's great. Wife is
Yeah.
39 weeks pregnant, so it's
Oh,
always chaos.
oh, and we were talking beforehand. You already have some children, right? Two other daughters.
Yep. 8-year-old Adeline, she's on the autism spectrum, and then
Okay.
five-year-old Lila.
And I don't know if I'd mentioned to you. I think I did. But my sister-in-law has a special needs child, and Taylor.
Hmm.
I think Taylor's 25. And so my heart goes out to you and your wife for that. So just that in general, that's a caretaking conversation that we can maybe have another show to maybe
Yeah.
talk and share and help people that are navigating that journey and all. But let's kick this off. And if you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to start your company, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, the first time I got exposed to estate planning, it probably wasn't the way you think. I was in law school, but it
Mhm.
was actually when my dad called to tell me that he was thinking about putting my mom into a nursing home.
Okay.
That was a really hard conversation for me to have because I was a major mama's boy, but at the same time,
Okay.
it was necessary. Um, so he got an attorney in Oregon. That attorney billed by the hour, and it was just a
Mm.
really, really hard situation for him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a couple years later, she passed away. My dad called me saying that she was being put on hospice and asked me to get home. So I flew home, saw my mom for the last time, and my dad handed me her will and said, "You're an attorney, read this." And I was really shocked to find that her will was over 30 years old. Um,
Wow.
to the point that I have a brother who's 4 years younger than me, and he wasn't mentioned in those documents in any way, shape, or form. So you can imagine the nightmare that could have been if they had passed away in a car accident or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So those experiences, really just dealing with all of those types of things. One of the things that my mom had was dementia,
Okay.
and I was sitting in my first law firm in Fayetteville, and I got a message on my phone saying that I was running out of memory. So I was sitting there scrolling through my phone, trying to figure out what was eating up all the space. And I found conversations I had recorded with my mom when my dad was trying to get guardianship over her. And unfortunately, they're the type of conversations you might be familiar with if you've ever dealt with someone who has dementia. And
Hmm.
they're her screaming and yelling and cussing, and your dad's only with me for my social security and those types of things. Um, and in that moment, I realized that my daughters would never hear her voice, which again,
Right.
as a major mama's boy, was a pretty hard thing to deal with. And so all those experiences together just really made me want to help people going through similar types of things.
Right.
Um, because of the fact that I feel like there's so many attorneys out there who really utilize people just as a dollar sign, and they treat people just like a dollar sign.
Yeah.
And my experiences have really helped me be able to connect and empathize with people and really just want to actually help.
Right. Well, on a side note, I'm a mama's boy too, and that's not something that we choose, right? It's just something that happens, and so we have a lot in common on that one, and
Yeah.
all. But isn't it, as far as people that are facing those challenges, because I'm entering the phase of that with my mom and dad now, and
Hmm.
mom's mind's not totally gone, but we're starting to see some signs. So my heart goes out to what you experienced there. But with that said, with you have firsthand experience of that, to where you're sort of dropped into this situation. And I try to share with everybody that it's on you before you know it. It's on a family before you know it. You
Hmm.
don't realize it's coming until it's there. And even though your father thought he had things in order, you quickly found out, oh my goodness, it's not.
Hmm.
So it's almost like, the pay now, pay later type of comment, to where it's easy to avoid conversations. It's easy to avoid sitting down with a professional like yourself, just to have an assessment, to go, hey, here's some things that you just need to be aware of. And if God gives us the days to naturally take its course, these are things you're going to be facing. And at least them have the knowledge of that. So with that said, at what age? I know this is a broad question, but at what age should someone sit down with you and discuss estate planning?
It's a great question. And I'm a firm believer that everyone over the age of 18 should have an estate plan. And the
Okay.
reason why is, although the odds of something happening to you increase as you get older, an 18-year-old can be in a car accident as easy as a 75-year-old, 85-year-old, 90-year-old. And there is a possibility of every single person becoming incapacitated. And it really turns into a question of, do you want the control of being able to decide who you want to make decisions for you in the event you do become incapacitated? Um, the true crisis is when a younger person who hasn't done any planning ends up in an incapacity situation, and the
Mm,
person that will be making those decisions is appointed by the court, and it may not be the person they would want. So, broad answer to your question is, I think everyone over the age of 18 should have an estate plan.
mm,
Now, it does become more relevant and more important as we age.
right.
And I'm a firm believer that you definitely need to have all your ducks in a row before you get to the point where we're looking at long-term care
Right.
issues. I can't tell you the number of people where a spouse comes in, a child comes in and says, my husband, my wife, my parent doesn't have any form of planning, and we're stuck looking at conservatorship, guardianship, issues with the court because of the fact that they don't have a financial power of attorney. They don't have a
Right.
medical directive. They don't have a will, and those simple documents that can allow you to stay in control. So, a more specific answer, I would say in your 60s, 50s, you should definitely be looking at these things because you have the ability to decide, I have control. I'm going
Right.
to say what I want. And at the end of the day, I'm taking this out of the court's hands. I'm taking it out of a stranger in a black robe's hands. And I'm going to decide what I want and who I want making these decisions.
Right. Well, with you saying that, I appreciate you sharing that because just starting, doing this podcast and having different people come on from different walks of life, the common denominator, and just like when you saying at 18, for some reason, my brain naively gets stuck in thinking about it's when you're older, even with hospice. Like hospice is not just for old, and end of life doulas is not just old people.
Hmm.
And so it's sobering when you really step back and start meeting different people. Obviously we're in the senior niche, but it's about caretaking. And just like you and your daughter and my sister-in-law and her daughter, caretaking is not just for old people, and estate planning is not just for old people. So that's a really
Hmm.
good point that you make. And it gets back to, I think I'll say it over and over and over and over, how families need to have these conversations and take the time to look into those things, because it's easy to want to avoid it. None of us wants to talk about end of life death, even though we start dying the day we're born, right? But it's just important for people to go ahead and pay attention. So with that said, when you do have crisis mode show up, and do you have a lot of families that are faced with having to place their loved ones into assisted living and they didn't take the time to meet with you on estate planning or make preparations for these days? Are you experiencing that a good bit?
Yeah. We definitely experience the situation where someone comes in and says, "My mom can't live at home anymore. My husband
Okay.
can't live at home anymore. My wife can't live at home anymore." And one of the primary things I would recommend and say is get connected with local resources.
Yes.
Um, there's so many entities out there like A Place for Mom and things like that, that what they're going to do is they're going to blast your information to every single assisted living facility. And then when you go to the assisted living facility in order to talk to them, well, they've already made the referral. And so they're getting
Right.
paid, even though that's all they really did. There's so many local agencies that will actually take you around at no cost to you. They'll
Mm.
tour the facilities with you. They'll make recommendations based on your specific needs, the needs of your family members, your loved ones, all those types of things, and really help you figure out where the appropriate place is. And that's one of the benefits of working with someone like me, is I'm connected with all those local resources. And so I can
Hmm.
get you connected with the the senior provisions, that all of those different entities who are going to be able to help you make the right decisions for your family.
Right.
Even if something's outside of my personal wheelhouse and I'm not the expert in that, I firmly believe in building a team of trusted advisors around my clients. And that means saying, I'm not the expert in this, but
Right.
this person is. And here's their info, and here's how they can help you, and then making that referral. Um,
Right.
That's one of the
Well,
primary things I'd say with the person who's looking at, hey, maybe it's not right to live at home anymore.
yeah, and not to spin off on that, but I'm glad you had mentioned that, because obviously that's where we put our flag in the sand, is being able to be advocates for seniors. And there's people can mistakenly go and they're looking for assisted living, and they fill out a form like a place for mom or caring.com, and then they're getting overwhelmed with phone calls. So that's where and there's a lot of good companies like my company, that helps with placement. And I know several of them. They're all good. And I recommend anybody and everybody, before you fill out a form, come through us or one of the local agencies. So it's literally spending the time from day one to walk with the family through it, go on
Mhm.
tours with them. We know the behind the scenes of the community. So I'm glad you pointed that out, because we're trying to bring that to light as well. As, hey, just because you fill out a form doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So with that said, to go along sort of with the last question, what are the main things that are delaying families from being able to get them into care sooner than later? Like, if they come to you in this crisis mode, what are the things you're going, I wish you would have came to me a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that could have
Yeah.
avoided this delay?
Yeah, so there's a couple of them. One of them is not having the right documents in place at that moment, because, kind of
Hmm.
like I said earlier, with the fact that everyone should have an estate plan, if you don't have that financial power of attorney, if you don't have the medical directive, someone else may not have the legal authority to make those decisions for you. Or you may not have the legal authority to make those decisions for your loved one and the person that you're trying to help, which
Right.
could delay being able to get them into the care that they really need.
Yeah.
Um, another major thing is just court battles, and the fact that anytime we're dealing with the court, it is an extensive process, and what we think is an emergency may not be what the court thinks is an emergency.
Right.
Going back to what you just kind of said, and the fact that having that local resource like you to be able to help you figure out the right facility, if we haven't done that legwork in advance and we get into the crisis situation, the place that you want to be, or you want your loved one to be, may not have any space,
True.
because we haven't made those relationships, we haven't done those things in advance.
Yeah.
So really, kind of my goal in all the educational types of things I do is really just to educate people and help you understand that you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah.
And quite too often, you don't know it until it's too late. And this is one of those same spots. It's so beneficial to start the work ahead of time,
Yeah.
before we're in the crisis. Before we go, oh, okay, the bill's going to be $6,000 a month, and we don't have that
Yeah.
because all of our money is in our house. And now we have to figure out, are we selling the house? Are we doing a reverse mortgage? What are we doing with all of those types of things?
Yeah.
Um, it's so beneficial to recognize the crisis on the horizon, have built that team of trusted advisors, and then we can meet the crisis head on when it actually does arise.
Yeah. Well, then once again, Daniel, good point, because we also have a division for helping on the real estate side. And what we
Hmm.
have found as well is, even though I could say that maybe the family's lucky enough to have some equity in their home, but I think you would can share some advice to where, okay, now it's time to go in and get that equity out. Oops, probate.
Hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it could have been some simple decisions made with sitting down with your company and companies like yourself to have remedied that. It wouldn't be a hurdle to overcome. So obviously that's something you see as well, to where crisis modes hit. They don't have the cash other than their home. Have you seen delays because of probate to even be able to get out of their home?
Absolutely. So there's one client that comes to mind where she wanted to sell her house, and her husband was in a memory care facility, and she didn't have power of attorney. She had gone
Mm,
to another attorney. This is one of my other caveats and things I'd highly recommend is, if you're dealing with these senior issues, if you have a diagnosis, if you have any of these types of things, make sure you go to a true estate planning attorney. Make
good
sure you
point.
go to a true elder law attorney, someone who actually knows these issues.
Mm,
And the reason I say that is, so many attorneys are going to say, yes, I do estate planning. But if you look at their website, they do personal injury, they do criminal law,
yes.
they do
Yeah.
domestic law, they do everything. I fondly call them door lawyers. And there's no offense to them, because they're good at some of the things that they do. Like one of my favorite firms is amazing at domestic work. I refer
Right.
all of my litigation and domestic work to them. However, they are not an estate planning firm. Can they do a simple will? Sure. But can they do these more complicated documents with special needs trusts and taking into account all the elder law things? No, they can't.
Yeah.
And if you go to one of those types of firms, they may not be thinking about all of these issues. And so that's what happened in this case I'm thinking about, where she took her husband to a local firm that's very reputable, and that firm prepared wills. They knew that there was a dementia diagnosis, but they didn't do anything beyond wills. They didn't do powers of attorney or any of those types of things. So when she went to say, I want to sell my house, and both her name and her husband's name were on the deed, we had to go to conservatorship to get her the legal authority to transfer the house to herself, to sell the house, to do all of those types of things. So she could downsize and continue her standard of living while he was in memory care, funding all of those types of things. So
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the fact that you need to have the right plan in place. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with delays with courts and all of those types of things. The legal fees get larger, the time it takes gets larger, the stress on the family gets larger. It's so much easier to deal with all these issues on the forefront than on the back end.
Yeah, and then that's a very good point, because that's the same thing applies to an accountant or a CPA, to where if you've got a certain industry that you're a professional in, especially let's use real estate, everybody will put the check marks like you said on what they do, but having the specific knowledge of a niche that you focus on, just that carries its own weight, because
Mm-hmm.
just like you can uh, not take advantage of some tax laws that are in place with someone that fully knows real estate, accounting, just like with you, you're focusing on the state planning, and you just stay in your lane. So you've got the knowledge of areas that you may not have. There may be some things that can be done that you were not aware of because you're not focusing firsthand on it. So I think that's a very valid point. Um, if you don't mind, I'd like to sort of have you, if you would, just share a little bit of your personal experiences with what you went through with your own mom and dad, because I think it's important for people to see the personal side of, hey, kind of really understand and kind of really know, because it's a the more transparent people can be, it's able to pass on that care to others to help them have an easier step in the process. But if you don't mind, could you share some things of what that was like, especially being a mama's boy? I'm experiencing those same things now. It's very hard to watch your mom and your dad, I don't want to say slip away, but just change.
Yeah.
Age is age. So you got any things you could share that maybe would help someone else that's maybe been through it and help them heal, or those that are going through it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of shared a little bit about this in the very beginning, but one of the major stories that I can think of, my mom was going through breast cancer in addition to the dementia and all of the other types of things. And I flew home to be with her. And unfortunately, my wife was going through a miscarriage at the time.
Wow.
Um, and
Jeez.
so we didn't want to tell my
Hmm.
mom because she couldn't really fully deal with those types of things.
Yeah.
And I want to share this in part because even if you're not the primary caregiver, it can be difficult dealing with the person with dementia. It can
Yeah.
be, and that's okay. It is okay to it's hard on every member of the family, every person involved.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was at home in Oregon helping with my dad and my mom, and my mom was being very difficult.
Yeah.
And I was really struggling to deal with that because I had
Yes.
my own emotional trauma going
Of course.
on.
Absolutely.
And I ended up getting into a major fight with my mom, and she's yelling at me and screaming at me, and I don't understand why you can't be a good son and things like that. And I ended up breaking down. I was sitting in the bathroom next to the shower, and I yelled at my mom, and I feel bad for this now, but I yelled at her, "I can't take this because
Mm.
my wife is going through a miscarriage right now."
Yeah.
And that snapped her to reality.
Wow.
And she got down on her knees and gave me a huge hug and took me in her arms, and she started crying with me, and
Mm.
because she had been so excited about meeting her granddaughter and all of those types of things. And I share that to say there will be moments where your loved one, especially if they have dementia, isn't there. And Mark, the words you used are kind of right. They're slipping away.
Yeah.
Um, and the person that you knew is not the person that they become. Kind of like I shared with the story of the voicemails that I found on my phone, the conversations I recorded on my phone. My daughters will never hear my mom's voice because at the end of the day, that's not who she was.
Yeah.
That's who the disease turned her into, but that's not who
Yeah.
my mom was. That's not the woman that I grew up with. That's not the woman who raised me. That's not the woman who took me on walks, all of those types of things. That's not the woman who cuddled me in the bathroom at the age of 30 years old while my wife was going through a miscarriage.
Mm.
And like I said, I share that to say it's hard. And you, as the loved one, will be dealing with that. And it sucks. And it's
Mm.
okay if you don't handle it perfectly every single time.
Daniel,
Just do your best.
I can't thank you enough for sharing that, because I got a lump in my throat right now. Because when mom started, we were faced with having to have someone stay the night every night.
Mhm.
And dad is 92, and he shouldn't be a caretaker. And he's got hearing aids. So when he goes to bed at night and takes them out, he's dead to the world.
Mhm.
So me and my sisters, one of my sisters passed away. And so it's me and my other two sisters. And we were, as siblings, trying to adjust to all this. And we're taking turns spending the night. I personally had my struggles with, that's my mom. And I know that there's people out there, Daniel, that are able to step up to the plate and do whatever needs to be done. But it's okay if you're not made that way. Meaning, I didn't want to face having to do female hygiene things with my mother.
Right.
And it wasn't that it would happen every night, but I didn't want to be in that situation if she had a oops. So it was severe anxiety on my nights that it was for me. And I know it's not easy for my sisters either, but when you shared that story with your mom, it was all very raw and new. We were trying to decide, hey, you know, thank goodness mom and dad had long-term care insurance. And I want to get off on and ask you some questions on that in a minute and your views on that and the options. But we're all dealing with life too, right? You were dealing with
Mhm.
your wife, miscarriage. That by itself is a huge load in life. So,
Yeah.
I've been dealing with some stuff professionally and all that. And I was out there and trying to adjust to mom and her changing. And she she was very resistant to us helping, I guess, especially us being the kids. And we got up the next morning, and I just put it this way: she pushed my buttons, and I didn't react properly. And then she didn't respond properly, and it turned into this extremely stressful encounter that I didn't know how to handle it, because it was a new category of a relationship, and I feel bad for the way I acted. But then she turns into just sobbing, and I could then I started seeing the mind slip. I realized this is not just her; it's
Mhm.
her mind, and she don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And Daniel, man, it put me in a funk for days. So I'm glad you shared that. But just for what it's worth, you're not alone, and don't you know? It's easy to beat ourselves up for those things, but anyway, thanks for sharing that. This is the kind of stuff that I want people to be able to see, that Okay, yeah, everybody sees the professional side of all of us out in life, but we're human beings. Duh, I know, but it's real, and it's okay to not be okay. So back to the long term care, and I know there's some other things that people can, insurance policies that people can put into play to where it can be a death benefit. It can also be a surrender value to where if God gives you the days and you live and you build up that cash value, those are strategies as well. Do you recommend those things as well to families when they come down and sit with you?
Yeah. So if you are young enough to obtain long term care insurance and you have the appropriate health to be able to obtain it and you can financially afford it, it is a wonderful tool. Study after study after study shows that dementia rates are rising.
Mm,
Medical science has gotten to the point where we're able to cure so much with the body, but we're not able to cure the brain. And
right.
so the number of people getting dementia, the number of people being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the number of people ending up in memory care, things like that are increasing rapidly at an uncontrollable rate.
Yes.
And so, if you have, again, the age, the financial resources, and the health to be able to obtain it, it is a wonderful tool. You probably, and to be clear, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an insurance agent. I don't sell any
Right.
products. I
Right.
believe again in building a team of trusted advisors, and there are amazing insurance agents and amazing financial advisors that can help you with all of the actual analysis of numbers. But if you are normally in your 50s to 60s, is when you want to be looking at long-term care insurance.
Hmm.
Any younger than that, and you're probably wasting money.
Right.
Um, any older than that, and you probably can't financially afford it.
True.
Um, my dad was, I believe, 70 when he looked for it, and it was going to be multiple thousands of dollars a month.
Oh,
And it was like,
wow.
at that point, there's
Okay.
no point to it. Like, you
True.
might as well just, if you can financially afford it, save that money, put it aside. And then if you have a long term care event, you've got money setting aside. But
Right.
it can absolutely be a wonderful tool because, similar to your family, Mark, it can be used to help pay for in home caregivers.
Hmm.
It can be used to pay for assisted living facilities. It can be used to pay for skilled nursing facilities. Um, One of the questions you asked earlier kind of touched on, and I didn't mention it, but I'm a firm believer that everyone should stay at home as long as you physically can. And long term care insurance can help you do that.
Yeah. We're seeing that firsthand, and I'm so thankful. Like I said, mom and dad took out their policy way back, and what makes that even more of an advantage today is they have a grandfather clause, so there's no cap on it. So
Yep.
they escape because the policies, the insurance companies, they're in business to make money, but
Hmm.
they got a really good policy, but it's helping them be able to stay home because the intimidating part, and I know you'll know what I'm saying is if even with the insurance, they still have to qualify to activate it. So it's you need 3 out of 5 ADLs. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter that you're 91. That don't
Hmm.
count by itself. So was of course mom got activated. Of course dad's not needing his, but it gets so overwhelmingly expensive even with insurance. If my mom and dad both had to face having full-time in-home care,
Hmm.
they could easily outlive their money, and they've done well. So that's when the decision would need to be faced was, hey, I think it's more cost effective and advantageous to look into a community or a private care home. And I don't
Hmm.
think people understand, that there's a lot of options other than these big, huge commercial communities. There's a lot of private care homes that can provide even almost better care than some of the bigger communities because it's like a 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 ratio of nurse to care versus 1 to 15.
Hmm.
So but anyway, I just wanted to add that as well. But is there anything at all, and it's okay if you don't, you like to discuss or something you can think of that's important that we may have overlooked?
But so the one thing that came to mind when you were just mentioning that is something that a lot of people don't think about is that there could be veterans benefits as well.
Good point.
And so, and to be clear, this is not legal advice. Every single person is unique, and every single family is unique, and it requires an individual analysis of assets and liabilities and expenses and all of those types of things. but there are some VA benefits that can be utilized for in-home care, for assisted living care, for things like that, that are
Mm.
available to veterans, spouses of veterans, widows or widowers of veterans, that served during a wartime period.
Right.
And generally, that doesn't mean that you had to spend your entire time serving. You just had to serve at least one day during that wartime period, and then you would qualify for some additional funding to assist with those expenses. So that's
And
always something that should be looked at as well.
yeah, and good point. And to go along with that, there's also some for people that are financially tight. There's some Medicaid waivers that some people
Hmm.
can apply for, and also in combination with the veterans benefits. So there again, there's a lot of resources available. And I think also you do provide a free consultation, correct?
Yeah, so what we do is any person who just wants to have a very short conversation, that type of thing, they can call and speak with my client service director. Her name's Emily, and that's the phone number that's right there on the screen. Um, and then they can also get some information from our website, which is right there on the screen as well. It What we normally do is direct people towards, if they're looking at the long-term care issues, a family asset protection planning session. And the family
Okay.
asset protection planning session is a 2 hour long meeting where we sit down and
Oh,
have
wow.
a detailed conversation about Medicaid, what Medicaid looks like, the options for the family, VA benefits, all of those types of things, and try to give a roadmap for where you could go from here. Um, Now, if you're not looking at long term care in the near future, we do offer a family wealth planning session. And the family
Mhm.
wealth planning session is a meeting where we're going to sit down and look at what would happen to you if you became incapacitated or passed away, what would happen to your family. And again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, this is important for everyone over the age of 18. Um, Important thing that I didn't mention that actually came to me during the conversation at one point was we actually work, and this might surprise you, Mark, but we work with a lot of families with minor children.
Okay.
And that's because we are in a sandwich generation. There are so many people who have young children, but are also starting to deal with their elderly parents.
Mm.
And these
Wow.
individuals are starting to think about the question of what would happen if I became incapacitated, not only to my parents, but also to my children, because of the fact that there's all sorts of guardianship issues. And I didn't fully think about this until one night when my wife and I went out to dinner, and my youngest daughter was under 1 year old, and we had her with a babysitter. And I realized, what happens if we get into a car accident right now?
Wow.
Where's she going to go? We don't have any family local. And so I started researching it and things like that, and found out from the Fayette County Sheriff's Department that the answer was she would go to DFACS because no one had the legal
Wow.
authority to care for her until a
Mm.
relative got on the scene. And so we do some really unique work that we call a kids protection plan, which helps bridge that gap. And so we have a lot of clients who are in that sandwich generation that are dealing with, hey, what about mom and dad? But also, hey, what about my kids? And how are we dealing with all of these types of things? It's a really interesting time to be in our generation
Yeah.
because we've got we're dealing with both sides.
Yeah. Well, it's like 15,000 people a day are turning 65.
Hmm.
And I think it's 15,000 turning 75. And you had kind of alluded earlier, it's becoming a crisis in this country. And I think, like I'd said earlier, and I'll continue to say it, and to be obnoxious, I'll say it so much, is people need to speak with professionals like yourself and just have the conversation. So you guys are located in Peachtree City,
Hmm.
uh, correct? And just asking, I don't know, do you do Zoom stuff for people that are further away? Is that
Yeah,
something that's
we have the ability to meet virtually for everything
okay?
other than the signing appointment. And
Okay.
so people who are outside of the metro Atlanta area, we can absolutely meet with you. That first meeting, again, we decide if we want to work together. Something we didn't talk about is we run a relationship based firm.
Right.
So at the end of the day, any relationship that you're in, you want to be in a positive relationship, not a bad relationship. And that
Yeah.
applies to the relationship you have with an attorney.
Yeah.
But your life is going to change. Your assets very well may change and the law may change. So we meet with all of our clients every 3 years And again, all of those types of things can be done over Zoom in order to make sure that your plan stays up to date and you don't end up in the situation like I was in with my parents, where
Right.
it's 30 years old and you have a child that's not even listed in the plan or things
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I think it's important because I attended one of your lunch and learns, which was just the information from that was spectacular. You did a wonderful job there. But
Thank you.
what you had shared at the end, which I think is important, is what sets you apart. Also, is you just chart your flat rate. So
Mhm.
you're not hourly, which that in itself has its advantages. People know what the cost is depending on the package that they choose. So again, with that, said, if anybody comes across this podcast, there's the way to get in touch with Daniel and his company. And I highly recommend that people take advantage of the free consultation, even starting at 18. Maybe we should start touring some of the places young people hang out, and let them know. But Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to get on this with me. I hope that this can stumble across someone's life, that it can make an impact and a difference. And I wish you all the best. So with that said, we are going to get off here. And until the next show, we will check everybody later.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure